For Inside Carolina, I'm Taylor Vippolis, and you're listening to this podcast, which is a part of the Inside Carolina Podcast Network. So, first off, thank you for being here. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to Inside Carolina wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube so you never miss any of the content our team at IC puts out. It hardly takes any time and it helps us out a great deal. Also, speaking of support, we want to support the people that support us. So that's why on this podcast, I have to remind everybody about Jimmy's Famous Seafood. The reason they wanted to sponsor this podcast is simple. They're owned by UNC fans, and with the pandemic and indoor dining restricted, it's a tough time right now to be a locally owned business. So it's helping out one of our own, and at the same time, you get ridiculously good seafood at a great price. A true win-win for everybody. Wondering, my go-to order is the famous gift box where you get two massive crab cakes, two different kinds of crab soup, and then a half pint of crab dip. Visit them online at jimmysfamousseafood.com, and at checkout, use the code hashtag GDTBATH for free 2-day shipping. That's promo code hashtag GDTBATH. All right, let's get to it. Like last week, I'm joined by my guy and Carolina basketball legend, Justin Jackson. Justin, since the last time we talked, Carolina splits two games with a loss at Florida State and then a win against Wake Forest yesterday. What have been your general takeaways over that two-game stretch for the Tar Heels?
Um, Man, I think there's a few. I think against a Florida State team who I think a lot of people are saying could have a good chance of winning the whole ACC. I think they have had really good spurts of some really good basketball. I think they really there for a while they were really playing how I think a lot of people thought that they could play, and obviously couldn't really pull that one out. But then going into the Wake Forest game against a team that's 0-5, obviously they're still a very talented team. They went out there and the game plan seemed like they worked it how they were supposed to. And so I think seeing like we talked about last time, seeing like Caleb Love, how he came out and he played against Wake Forest. And he even had spurts in the Florida State game too, where it seems as if he's just getting better and better. And then, obviously the bigs down low, the way Armando's playing right now, I think is really the key as far as their success going. And, obviously having somebody like Garrison who's already shown what he can do and can do that on a consistent basis. I think they've shown glimpses of, really getting better. So I think it's just a matter of staying with it, man.
Yeah, those two games with Florida State, Leonard Hamilton has built a really good program down in Tallahassee. They're long, they're athletic, they really match up well against Carolina. And then a team like Wake Forest, who is winless in the ACC, Roy mentioned in his post-game press conference, they've been leading or have had a lead pretty late in basically every game. They're just not finding the ways to win games, kind of like Carolina struggled early on in the year closing out games. Wake Forest is just having those same issues, but it's a program that seems like it has the right coach for the first time in a while, and they're kind of trending in the right direction. And a huge spark in the Florida State game was Carolina getting somebody like Anthony Harris back. What do you think Ant brings to the team when he's healthy and 100%?
Um, just by seeing him, to be honest, I never really got a chance to see a lot of them from last year. But just by seeing him, in those minutes that he was out there against Florida State, like he brings a different type of energy off the bench. It's like somebody that just goes out there and works, and plays hard. And I think having a guy like that, coming off the bench, when maybe the first five didn't necessarily bring the energy that they needed to, having somebody to bring that spark. It's funny. We were talking about Theo at the end of last time, but we would always joke when we were at school, like he was that spark plug. Like whenever he would come off the bench, and so having somebody that can come off the bench and bring that energy and obviously be able to make plays like he can, and things like that, I think that's going to be huge for the team.
Yeah, the school that I'm at now, helping coach Paul the Sixth, that's where Anthony Harris comes from. So I'm really familiar with kind of his backstory and his upbringing. And he's a guy who he's going to go in and he understands that it all starts with his defensive performance, and then that defense can kind of spark his offense. And his high school coach Glenn Farello, he's a guy who he knows basketball in and out like the back of his hand, and you could tell that when Anthony plays, he has all the fundamentals. He knows where to be. He's a player that picks up on things really quickly, and I've seen some people wanting him to be in the starting lineup or wanting to see a huge minute increase. But how would you kind of handle expectations for Harris since he is coming off two major knee surgeries in 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just say kind of pump the brakes. You know what I mean? Like basketball is all about feel and all about getting comfortable. And you can't expect somebody to come who's coming off, like you said, two huge surgeries in 2 years to just be able to be thrown out there for 30 minutes and go. That's just not physically possible, you know. And then you throw the whole skill and feel thing out there. Like it's tough to go from doing one-on-one workouts and maybe two-on-two, and then maybe a little bit of practices, and then all of a sudden just be thrown out there. It's tough. So, I think it's just one of those things we have to kind of just watch. I think, like I said, with the energy and stuff that he brings, I think he will earn and show that he needs a few more minutes. Um, but I don't think just throwing him back in the starting lineup or all of a sudden giving him 25 minutes is going to be good for him personally or the team. So I think it's just a matter of watching him, and see if coach sees that, if he's earning more minutes and kind of getting more comfortable, I think then we'll see a little bit more minutes for him.
Yeah, with that minute increase, I think it's a case kind of like you mentioned where you just have to trust Roy, you have to trust Doug and the training staff for Carolina, because I think when you watch a player like Anthony Harris, it's clear that when he's in the game, he's making an impact and he's giving you the best chance to win. So obviously you're going to want to play him more, but at the same time, you don't want to jeopardize his future or jeopardize the team's future where he's just playing minutes where he's not ready to be playing that like 30 minutes that you kind of mentioned. But moving to the Wake Forest game, Armando Bacot, he had another strong showing, 18 points on 8 of 10 shooting, where every time Wake Forest kind of made a run, he had an answer for them to build Carolina's lead back up. And I think we'd agree that he's been UNC's best and most consistent player at this point up to this season. And as a perimeter player, what can Carolina do to get him even more paint touches since it seems like he's borderline unstoppable at times this season?
I mean, I think it just kind of goes back to what we have talked about. If they get more um, perimeter shooting, if they're able to stretch the defense a little bit more, having Caleb hit shots, having RJ hit shots, having Kerwin hit shots, that automatically makes the guards and the guys that can help on the bigs stretch out more to try to run people off the perimeter. And so when you have guys that are making shots like they did against Wake Forest, when he gets the ball down low, it's just him versus his defender. He doesn't have to worry about all these other help defenders and all that other sort of stuff. So I think that's just really what it is the perimeter guys being such a threat that they're low. He can go get a bucket easily. So, as long as he continues to play aggressive and play as well and assertive as he is right now, I think with the guard play as they're getting better and better, and I think they'll just keep getting better. I think it's going to be even easier for them.
And then another talking point that the fans love, where it's the three guarantees in life: it's death, taxes, and a team shooting the ball well from three against Carolina. Wake Forest entered the game as a team ranked 164th with 7.3s a game, and then 238th shooting the three at 31.89%. So, of course, they make 13 threes on 38%. How would you explain Carolina's defensive strategy and why it always leads to a 3-point barrage for the other team?
Um, I think it's unfortunately it just kind of is what comes with how Carolina defense is. Coach is really big on getting out in passing lanes and denying and stuff like that. And so, when you overplay at times, it causes rotations, and then when there's rotations, there's going to be a lot more open shots. And then even, one of coach's big things is, trying to help on any drive, whether it's a guy helping in from the corner or a guy helping from the slot or whatever it is. So from the help side, it creates, pass and kick, stuff, actions that are tough to guard. And so when you're always in rotations at times, those shots seem a lot easier because they're a lot more open. Like you look at what's his name? I think his name was Isaiah, the guy from
Yeah.
Wake Forest that hit 7 threes.
Mucius, yeah.
I mean, he shot 4 for 24 going into the game, and then went 7 for 12. So it's like, I think unfortunately it's just kind of the way the defense happens. Even when I was there, I don't think we were necessarily that high as far as like allowing 3-pointers. But it's just, on defense at times it's kind of a give and take. You got to give up something at times, and unfortunately sometimes it's the 3-point line. So, I wouldn't necessarily freak out over it. I think some of the wide open threes that they had is maybe something to kind of worry about a little bit, but it's just kind of what comes with it, I think.
Yeah, the wide open threes, and then I think where Roy also had a problem was the second chance points that led to threes, where Carolina got beat on the offensive glass and gave up threes that way. How did Roy kind of teach when the ball goes into the posts, where I thought I noticed a lot more players digging down yesterday in the post, which led to threes when you on paper you have guys like Sharp and Bacot and Brooks who should be able to hold their own, but how is he kind of coaching once the ball is getting into the post?
Yeah, I mean, most of the time it's a post. Um, then you'll either dig or you'll do full help rotate. Um, I'm not totally sure why they were doing that with Wake Forest, because there's obviously no disrespect to Wake Forest, but their bigs weren't really their strength. And with our bigs being our biggest strength, you kind of look at, say, okay, just guard them one on one, and then that leaves all the digging and then having a long closeout, all that sort of stuff. So I'm not totally sure why. Obviously they went over it, in scout and all that sort of stuff, and that's what coach wanted to do. But usually it's a dig, but the dig isn't supposed to be so far in there that when they just pass it out, it's an easy shot. So, obviously it's probably one of those things where they'll probably work on it in practice and keep on working because, I mean, they'll run into some bigs that are even better, and maybe even some shooters that are even better. So they'll probably keep working on it, but usually that's what coach wants to work on.
Yeah, I'm always curious when I see some of the choices that Roy makes, but it's never from a perspective of like I think I know what I'm doing more. It's a still a coach who has 3 national champions, and he's, however many wins away from I think 900, which would only be like the 4th coach. So he obviously knows what he's doing and how to prepare a team, but it's always curious to see, how there's so many different coaches and how they can all have kind of different philosophies and find success with those different philosophies. And I'm glad you mentioned Isaiah Mucius, who shoots 7 of 12 from 3. Like you mentioned, going into the game, he was only 4 of 24. What is that like in game where you have what you believe is a sound scouting report, and then a player goes out there and goes completely against it, and within 4 minutes the scouting report is being thrown out?
Man, I think scouting reports are great to kind of give you the whole picture um, of things. There were so many times, man, we would have scouting reports, and it would be, this guy's a capable shooter, but we're not going to freak out if he hits one. Um, and the dude would go on to hit 4 or 5. You know, um, so I think like scouts and scouting reports, obviously they do a great job there at giving you kind of, whether it's the guy you're guarding or kind of just the team itself, of kind of their, tendencies and what they like to do and stuff like that. But then honestly, like I said before, basketball is such a game of feel. Like the dude shot 4 for 24, but he saw 1 or 2 go in, and that's all it really takes. And he his form and everything looks like he is a very good shooter. So when you are a shooter, or at least you have been a shooter in the past, when you see a couple go in, it's a lot easier. right? Especially when you're not. I mean, you look at Caleb, for instance. Like Caleb was not shooting the ball at all very well, right? Like wasn't shooting at all. Sees a couple go down, and I guarantee you his confidence and everything like that skyrockets. So like the big picture, but then you just got to adjust as the game goes on because it got 4 for 24, has 7 threes. That's just when you got to start adjusting to, man.
The most worrying thing I think from Carolina's perspective is they trailed at halftime to Wake Forest. They're being outscored now by 22 points in first halves this season. In your opinion, what do you think Carolina can do to get off to better starts where it feels like they start every game flat almost?
Um, honestly, I don't really know. I mean, it's kind of something that they themselves, I think, are going to have to figure out however it is, whether it's for us, we would have like small little things that we would do before a game to get us like get our energy going. And I'm sure it's tough too because we had the crowd to get us going. And as small as that might take, that really does get you going a whole when you go out there and you've got the crowd going crazy before the game and all that sort of stuff. But I think it's whatever they need to get going. Because once you start playing these teams, that are obviously you play at Florida State, you play guys, other teams that are a whole lot better than maybe a Wake Forest. You got to come out a lot better. You can't just rely on the second half because in the ACC, if you get down too much, it's going to be really tough to come back. So I think it's just whatever they can find, whether it's pregame music in the locker room or it's them just coming out with a different mindset. Whatever it is, man, I think it's whatever they can find. I don't know if I can necessarily give them the answer to that.
This team is a lot different than the teams that you played on, where you guys, your junior year, you were coming off a national championship. So it's a little different of a perspective, but how hard is it going against a nationally ranked opponent, on prime time, ESPN, all that, and then kind of the flip side of that where you do have to go and play a Wake Forest who is winless, and is that hard from a motivational standpoint where you're trying to find that internally?
I think it is tough from the standpoint of um, like not having those thoughts of like, man, this team's 0-5, man. Like we got to go out here and play these guys. They're not very good. Um, it is tough at times to get through that. But at the end of the day, especially in college, I mean, you play what 30 something games in the regular season before the March Madness starts. I mean, each and every game really does matter, and I think for each individual player, they should view it as okay, if I'm in a slump right now, okay, this is the game that I'm gonna get out of the slump, or this is the game that we can get better and find something else out about ourselves. And it's easy for me to sit here and say that now that I'm out of college or now that I'm older and kind of view basketball a little bit different, but that's just kind of how they should view it as okay, let's go out here and let's get better today. Let's figure out ways to work on this or work on this, and let's view this team as somebody who's undefeated in ACC. I think that's something that we did really good at, and obviously we had bad games and stuff like that my junior year, but pretty much my all 3 years, especially my last 2 years, we tried to view each opponent as a really good team. And if you can do that, I don't think you necessarily will play down to your competition. But it is tough. It's tough as a basketball player. When you're like, dang, like we just, like you said, we played on ESPN against a Florida State, who's really good, and now all of a sudden you're on ACC Network and against a team that's 0-5 in the conference. Against a team that shoots 31% from three. It's like, man, like what are we gonna do now to get us going? So if they can kind of keep that mindset as far as just trying to get better and view each team as a really good team, I think they'll get better and better as the time goes on.
Yeah, and it's something that can get scary kind of quickly where you're wearing the North Carolina, like we mentioned last week, that's a target on your back already. If you guys don't come in with the mindset that this game matters, the other team in the other locker room playing a team like North Carolina, if they could beat a North Carolina, that makes their season for a team like Wake Forest who has struggled early. But in the post-game press conferences, Armando, he was talking about how Roy and Hubert Davis questioned their effort early on. What is the halftime speech like from the coaches where everybody knows you didn't play up to the standards and it's not just shots aren't falling, it's an effort issue?
It can get kind of fiery, man. Somebody as nice and as gentle as Coach Davis is, man, like he can get kind of fiery in the locker room, let alone Coach or Coach Rob or everybody else in there. So I think it's like you said. I think the biggest thing is like when they view it as an effort thing, not necessarily just a shot just going down or maybe a few mistakes here or there. When it's effort, I think that's whenever it really gets them going. Um, and like you said, against a Wake Forest team, being down at halftime, um, I don't think that's necessarily what you want to see. And so I'm sure at halftime, man, it got kind of, I'm sure they lit into them a little bit, but at the end of the day, sometimes that's what you need. So, I'm sure it got them going. Obviously, they were able to pull out the win, so I'm sure it helped a little bit.
Yeah, I'm glad I'm not in that locker room because in my head, I have this image of Roy as the lovable, daggum grandpa. And I don't think I could handle him yelling in the locker room. Does it get scary in there?
Hey, man, it's I wouldn't necessarily say it gets scary because I don't know if anybody's physically scared of Coach. But when it comes to when he gets fired up, it does get uh it does get kind of like you got to really lock in. You realize, okay, yeah, this is serious. You know what I mean? So it definitely gets you locked in.
Luckily, Carolina didn't give up on Caleb Love like some people had mentioned and some people had wanted. He had his best game yesterday, and you could start to see him out there putting things together. He scores 20 points on 58% shooting. What did you see from Love that led to that type of performance?
Man, you know what? And it's funny that right after, week after we talk about, fans and stuff like that are kind of wanting to, jump off the Caleb Love boat. Um, it's funny that he comes back and he plays as well as he did. I think one of the things that I've noticed with him is, you know, playing within the offense and not forcing things. And whether in the start of the season, whether it was because he was in a slump, he felt like he had to be a more assertive, or he had to shoot himself in Florida State a little bit. Like yesterday, he really, he really showed what he can do without forcing it, right? Like, I mean, he all of his shots, most of them at least, um, were either in transition, they were within the offense, they were open where he could take his time and knock the shot down, or it was in a play where he didn't have to force it. Um, and I think when he plays like that, he's awesome, right? Like when anybody starts forcing it and starts trying to feel like they got to do extra to try to, and I playing within himself and playing within the offense, I think showed how good he can be within that. And so I'll say it again for all those fans out there, they're like, you know, Caleb Love, I don't know if he's the one. Give it time. You know what I'm saying? Like, give it time. Like, he's shown glimpses. Obviously, yesterday he had a really good game. And I personally think that he's just going to get better and better as time goes on. So, hopefully he can kind of carry this momentum. And I kind of saw, I think he did one of the post game press conferences after the game. And, for him, he kept on talking about confidence, and it's kind of the whole mental aspect of he knows he can play. His teammates know he can play. His coaches know he knows he can play. It's just a matter of just confidence. Continue to keep those confidence going. Continue to keep that mental space right. And if he can do that, I think he'll be just fine.
Yeah, going off that post-game press conference for Love, I thought it was interesting when he mentioned that he has a strong support system that he can lean on during a slump. He's talking with his parents, he's meeting with the coaches, his teammates believe in him. How important is that aspect? Because that outside noise can get so loud at times, especially at a place like Carolina where expectations are always ridiculously high.
Well, look, I'll be the first to say, man, like I love Carolina fans are the best in the country, but at times they can be the worst in the country too, right? Like, and people might not like me saying that, but it's like, when you're doing really, really good, and it's really any fans, honestly, but when you're doing really, really good, you're freaking the best player to ever come through North Carolina, right? But when you're not doing well, some fans are really quick to just say, "Oh, like he's not the one." You know what I'm saying? And so, for me, I wish I would have known this whenever I was there. But like now, where I'm at, I don't even have social media on my phone, right? And so, social media is usually where you kind of see the most, you know, the hateful things that are said or the negative things that are said. But for him, the fact that he has that supporting cast, and I know like when people say North Carolina is a family, you know, that's where it's really shown. As far as your teammates, they always have your back, right? The coaching staff always has your back. But the fact that he has like his family that he can go and talk to and other people that he can go and talk to that are still supporting him and still pushing through. Hopefully he's able to kind of block out all the other noise and all that other stuff and kind of keep going. But having supporting cast, bro, that's probably one of the most important things to have in sports, especially when you're going through a rough patch, because it's like, what am I going to lean on? And so I'm glad that he has that supporting cast that he talks about.
With that supporting cast, in the post-game press conference, Roy mentioned he thinks that Love can be one of the best defensive guards he's ever coached. And he also brought up that he told Love that he thought he was getting better earlier this week. What is that like when you have a coach in Roy who he's going to be really hard on you, but it's because he knows how good you can be, and to have someone like that who believes in you?
I had somebody tell me a while back, and it was pertaining to like coaches, and they were saying basically that if a coach doesn't talk to you, if a coach doesn't get on to you, if a coach doesn't get angry at you, or a coach doesn't say anything to you, then you should be worried, right? Like because obviously that means he doesn't feel like it's necessarily uh, there's no point of trying to coach you because you don't have the skill to get to where he thinks you need to get or whatever. And so coach has always been that way. You know what I mean? Like if coach is always on Caleb Love, it's because he knows Caleb Love can be a great point guard at North Carolina. If he's always on so and so or whoever, it's because he knows and he's seen so many players before, and he knows what they can become. And so I think that should, even though in the moment it doesn't feel like it at all, but that should give you some sort of confidence, knowing, okay, you know what, like coach thinks that I can be this, and so this is what I'm going to go out and do because of that confidence that he gives me. Um, and I think hearing those things from coach in the press conference, if he hears it or not, that's something to really feel good about. It's something to keep on striving for because coach isn't compliment after compliment after compliment. You know what I'm saying? He's not necessarily that way, but the fact that he was saying that he sees him getting better each and every day, and defensively he could be one of the best guards that he's ever coached. I mean, that's high praise. And so, I think that should give him some confidence. I think that's big coming from coach, and I think we'll just have to kind of see how that evolves.
I think one of the biggest things for Love too was that he really turned up the defensive intensity, which led to the offense for him. He let the defense be his offense, where Carolina scored 24 points off turnovers yesterday against Wake Forest. What does that do for a team where you can ramp up the defensive pressure and you can steal some easy baskets the other way?
I mean, it's huge, especially from a team who obviously they've shown that they can score the last couple games, but a team has struggled at times to score in the half court. And I think when they're able to, get those steals, when they're able to get fast break dunks or get fast break buckets, it gets you a little bit more fired up. And so then, defensively and offensively, your energy level is just so much higher. I think seeing, especially for individual players, seeing guys like, seeing Caleb get a steal and go finish on the other end with a dunk, you can tell it visibly gets him going, and I think that's huge for players, especially at times whenever it's tough to score. So I think that's huge for them to try to make defense into offense. That's always been a Carolina thing is like defensively, we want defensively to turn into our offense, like whether it's fast breaks, points off turnovers, or even on a make, getting it and going. And so I think if they can keep doing that, it'll just make their half court offense even easier because it's like, okay, we already got 20 points off fast breaks, 20 points off turnovers. Now let's just get some buckets in the half court and we'll be fine.
Coming up next for Carolina, they play NC State on Saturday. UNC lost the first game against them earlier this year, which dropped Roy's record to just 37-5 now against the school from Raleigh. What is the lead up to a game against State like? Can you sense it that this game normally means more to the team?
For sure, for sure. And I think obviously this team's super young, so they won't necessarily feel it. I know some of our coaches, they will allow them to feel it, I think. But you can definitely feel it. I mean, obviously Duke is like the main rivalry, right? But when it comes to NC State, North Carolina, there's a serious hate when it comes between those two schools. And so I think they will feel it. I think obviously losing the first one, I think there will be a lot more energy prior to the game. But I think it's just a matter of, okay, you know what? Like I said before, even though it's a rivalry game, we got to try as best as we can to look at it as just another game, just another ACC game. And so I think that it's one of those things where it's up until then they got to prepare, they got to do everything that they possibly can to view NC State as another team that beat them early on in the season. And if they can do that, once the rivalry starts and once coaches and players start talking, then it'll just fuel them a little bit more. But if they can do that, I think they can go out there and beat them.
Yeah, with that loss earlier this year, Roy's overall record against them, and then just how big the State UNC rivalry kind of is. I can't imagine UNC coming out flat like they have in a couple earlier games this season. But Justin, thanks for taking the time, getting on here today, and looking forward to talking next week.
Of course, man. I appreciate you.